Well, joining us now in the studio is Ben Butcher, our data editor. Thanks for coming in, Ben. Great to see you. Now, Ben, you've got data for each of these swing states. We're currently forecasting a narrow win for Trump, I think, 270 electoral college votes to Harris getting 268. So which state do you see each of them winning?
At the moment, we have Trump winning all of those swing states with the exception of Pennsylvania, Michigan and Nevada. Our election model basically takes the polling that we have, which you see every single day throughout the press, and we take that and we run hundreds of simulations with that data, adjusting things like voter turnout, which you were talking about earlier on, adjusting things like how different demographics might vote, how the states have previously voted. So we run those simulations, and from that we produce a best average result, and from that it has Trump winning by just 2 electoral college votes. Now, that doesn't give any kind of certainty because within those simulations, in 60% of them the Republicans win, in 40% of them the Democrats win. So although it's a lovely top-line figure, unfortunately we can't say with any confidence about who's going to win this election at this point.
I've heard so many people say that anybody who says who will win doesn't know what they're talking about. But as we say, there does seem to have been something of a momentum shift towards Trump in the past few days. The Economist, the polling aggregator 538, the statistician Nate Silver, they've all started suggesting that Trump has now got a higher chance of winning. As you say, Ben, nothing is definite. Everything is within the margin of error. Have you seen that shift in our modelling towards Trump?
100%. I mean, a month ago in the national vote share, which, as we've spoken about, doesn't really mean anything in this election, we've seen Trump cut that gap behind Kamala from 4 points down to less than 1. So that's a massive bit of momentum. I think at this point, what polls are really good at is pointing people in the direction of where things are heading. What they're not very good at is making conclusive answers effectively. I mean, in every single poll, you see a margin of error of around 3 points. So if somebody is leading the other candidate by 2 points, they could actually be behind them by 3 points. So that kind of margin of error is built into all of these polls. And so in every single swing state, I think with the exception of Georgia, you're seeing a gap of about 1 point over the other candidates. That is completely inconclusive. So if anyone is saying that they know who's going to win the state of North Carolina, the state of Arizona, the state of Pennsylvania, they are effectively misguided in terms of how to read polls at this point. It's helpful for us to have these because it does show you roughly where people are heading, and the change over time is also really good because it shows you what the momentum is doing. But yeah, I wouldn't be drawing anything at this point, and it will make the election night even more exciting, I think.
Do we know roughly what percentage of voters in each swing state are still undecided?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking into this earlier. I know that nationally it's about 10% of people a few days ago said they were undecided. It's actually smaller in the swing states, perhaps because they've had that massive concentration of campaigning going on in their area. So 10% is not a lot for them to play with. And perhaps even more importantly, about 20% of the entire electorate has already cast their vote because you have a lot of early voting in the United States. We were looking at states like Michigan where about a third of people have voted. That's an important swing state. So in these areas, they're obviously going to be going back over and over in the next few days, but most people have made up their minds. In Pennsylvania, we do have data on the people who voted and their party registration. We have seen a little bit of an uptick in early voting from Republicans in this election, which obviously bodes well for Trump. But again, really early days. Polls don't necessarily suggest that's what's happening. So that's just one thing we've seen. We'll find out on the night.
It'll be amazing, Ben, and we'll be together for our exclusive coverage overnight after the American election day. But a question from you now, for you, Ben. Finn North asks, how accurate are the polls in America? Are they more or less accurate than in the UK? And why do the bookies believe that Trump will win, but the polls suggest that Kamala will win?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think accuracy in polling, the USA has had a bit of a bad reputation in the last 2 elections. I mean, if you take a state like Wisconsin in 2016, they had Clinton 8 points ahead of Trump the week or so before the election. He goes in and wins that state to the shock of everyone there. The Trump supporters are notoriously difficult to reach by pollsters. They already have a kind of disregard for mainstream institutions, pollsters included. They're also just economically poor people, just generally are more difficult to reach by people. They're less likely to hang around on the phone, less educated. So it is a group who are quite difficult to reach. They also base a lot of their weighting, because polls are weighted if they feel that they haven't reached certain people, off midterm election results, which MAGA people are less likely to actually turn out for, because they're all about Trump, not necessarily about the Republican Party. So I hope that there has been some adjustments since then. I think there'll be a lot of egg and face if they go into their third Trump election and they still have those massive margins away from the reality. I imagine they have done. The fear for Republicans might be that potentially that now overweighting for Trump and pushing him up a little bit. So that's one of the great unanswered polling questions. But I think the second part of that question is also key. I mean, you've seen that momentum which has happened in the last few weeks, which directly impacts betting markets. Because what you'll see there is the momentum in polls means that people start moving over to Trump and start putting on bets whilst the odds for him are still pretty high. So they can kind of get ahead of the movement that might actually happen. So that's what you see in the betting markets now. It's now 60% implied chances of Trump winning. Basically, what those reflect are a exaggerated version of what we already see in the polls. We've seen that, so we see that happen in pretty much all US elections. The betting odds kind of move in the direction of the polls. In 2016, they had Hillary Clinton on a 85% chance of winning, right up until about 1 in the morning of election night. And we also saw the same thing happening over here in the UK. That's the very same year during the Brexit vote, where it wasn't until 1 a.m., 2 a.m. until they changed. So I think there's this thing about betting odds. I think that people kind of fetishize it a bit and think that because people are putting their money there, they're going to have this supreme authority over the actual polling. No, I think they're just really following what the combined consensus is in the media and in the polling.
Wow, 85%. They got that very badly wrong, didn't they? What does the national polling data tell us? We've talked about where we think election will be won and lost. It's all about those swing states. What about the popular vote? What do we know about that?
I think we kind of got into this election with that assumed kind of knowledge that Trump might win the electoral college vote and Harris would win the popular vote, same as happened in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. I think we probably are still going to see that result. I kind of thought that Trump was going to win for a while. I think there was a lot of vibes-based thought going into Kamala.
Vibes is not very polling data.
No, it's not.
But go on.
But this is, I mean, there's this surge which happens when you have a new person in any kind of political scene. So she obviously saw that big jump that happens both in approval rating and in terms of national vote. I think it was always going to come back down. So I think with the national voting intention, you've seen that. So you've seen that kind of gap really slowly cutting over the last kind of few weeks. In the Telegraph's analysis, we have less than 1% now. So that knowledge, or that assumption that we had going into this, that she would win the popular vote, I'm now not even convinced on that. Of course, the electoral college system does benefit the Republicans in the sense that you have these huge states like California and New York who'll have loads of the popular vote, who contribute a lot to that, but not necessarily contribute as much to the electoral college vote. That's because they try not to give too much power to those larger states, try and give those small Republican states like Nebraska the kind of a bit more push through overweighted electoral college votes.